You're watching the Randy and Christa show. I'm Christa Orecchio, and this is news that makes you healthier. And today we are going to help you, especially if you are struggling with symptoms like hair loss, constipation, debilitating fatigue, no matter how much sleep you get. If you have any manner of thyroid issues, whether that be hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's disease, that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm so excited to share my guest with you guys. We have Izabella Wentz, Dr. Izabella Wentz. She is the thyroid pharmacist and the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Hashimoto's Thyroiditis, The Root Cause. Izabella, welcome to the program.
Hey, Christa, it's so great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you live in studio because so many people struggle with their thyroid and many of them don't know about it. And I think that's your story, right?
Absolutely. So I struggled with thyroid disease for almost a decade before I was properly diagnosed. And I didn't know what was going on with me. I was losing my hair. I was constantly fatigued, sleeping for 12 hours to feel energized.
12 hours a day you needed to sleep.
12 hours each night. So as you can imagine, most of my early 20s were spent sleeping. I began to have carpal tunnel in both arms. I had to wear arm braces just to be able to complete my workday.
I had no idea. So, and this is why we have the Randy and Christa show, is to help bring these things to light so people don't lose their 20s like you did.
Absolutely. And it was one of those things that I kept going from doctor to doctor. And they suggested that maybe I was getting older. I was 25 at the time.
You're 25, it's all downhill from here.
Right. Or maybe that I was too stressed out, or that it was all in my head. And so typically women are not getting the answers they need from their doctors. And so I'm really, really excited that you've had me here, that you have me here today so we can talk about this.
Absolutely. Okay, so for people who don't know what the thyroid is, what it affects within the body, give us the cliff notes about the thyroid and why it's really the most important gland.
Sure, of course. So the thyroid gland is a very tiny gland that lives at the base of our neck, and it looks like a butterfly. What it does in very simple terms is it basically helps to impact our metabolism. So it makes things happen in the body. There are thyroid receptors in every single cell in the body. So we're going to get into thyroid symptoms in a little bit, but they're very nonspecific because thyroid hormones affect every single cell in the body. And when I like to think of the thyroid gland, it basically creates energy and moves things along in our body.
So it controls the pace of your digestion, it controls, it's your internal thermostat, it really controls so much of our experience of life. Okay, so now there are different types of thyroid issues that can occur. Why don't you go ahead and list the different types of thyroid issues that you've seen that people have?
So one of the most common thyroid conditions, and this is probably the issue that majority of people are going to struggle with if they have a thyroid condition, is going to be hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid. And I like to think of it as basically slowing down. So you're going to be more tired, you're going to be more brain fogged, your hair may start falling out, you're going to be sluggish, and you may have the potential to gain weight. So you may be somebody that is eating the same type of diet you were eating, and you're doing the same amount of exercise that you have been doing, but yet you're going to be putting on weight month after month after month if your thyroid is not properly regulated. The other issue that we sometimes see, and this is less common but may also occur, is hyperthyroidism, and this is an overabundance of thyroid hormone. So I like to think of it as basically speeding up. So you might have palpitations, you might be anxious. Unfortunately, some people also have fatigue with this issue. Weight loss is going to be more common. So I've seen people who lost, 5 to 10 pounds within a few weeks' time, and it can be quite scary. And another common symptom of this may be that a person may have some eyeball protrusion, which can be very confusing and very distressful for the person. And then we also, some people may have thyroid cancer. So this is something that can happen in some cases, and we're not going to get into that today, but it's something that people should be aware of.
Absolutely. Now, you have had 100,000 copies of this book sold. Congratulations for really, and I know you were friends, and I know you wrote this book to share your story and to help others reverse this. so they don't have to go through all of these symptoms and live that way. So what is the biggest success story that comes to your mind? You know, you have 100,000 people out there that are reversing thyroid disease, and so let me hear, you know, is it weight, is it fatigue, is it the mental emotional process?
You know, it's just so hard to choose a success story, but just the thyroid gland can impact every cell in the body. And one of my issues was that I began to have new onset panic attacks, and I didn't know what was going on with me. I had a background in mental health, and I saw multiple doctors, and I was offered anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants, all kinds of medications. And so as a pharmacist, I also used to specialize in helping people get off of these very heavy-duty psychiatric medications that known as antipsychotic drugs that can really, really mess up somebody's metabolism and can, unfortunately, I've seen people who've turned into basically zombies after certain types of medications.
It affects everything about their life, their productivity, their career choice, the quality of their relationships, and it's masking the root cause.
Absolutely.
So you've seen people be able to successfully titrate off of their anxiety and depression medication and get their life back.
Antipsychotic medications as well. So I had a client who was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, hospitalized for a psychotic disorder, and she came across my website, and it turned out that she actually had Hashimoto's, and she was in the early stages of Hashimoto's, which can put people on somewhat of an emotional roller coaster. And so she thought she was going crazy, and she thought she was losing her mind. She had been hospitalized. It turned out that it was her thyroid that was putting her on an emotional roller coaster, and once her thyroid was optimized through the use of appropriate hormones and through the use of lifestyle interventions, she was able to get off of her psychiatric medications, and you know, she ended up getting married and starting a family.
Which is why we do what we do, right? So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition of the thyroid and hyperthyroidism. But now you say, and in your book, this is my copy, by the way, you guys see how much I've earmarked everything, how much I love this book. You say 90% of hypothyroidism in the US is actually Hashimoto's, but a lot of people aren't getting that diagnosis because they're not running the right lab stats. They're really just looking at a small piece of the picture when we need to look at the functional range to really understand the total picture of the thyroid. So can you talk about that so that anybody watching can go to their doctor and say, these are the labs I want to run?
So absolutely. And you know, my story was that I was going to from doctor to doctor year after year and complaining about fatigue and all of these symptoms. And they actually did test my thyroid, and they told me that my thyroid was normal. When in fact, looking back at these labs now, I know that one, that my thyroid was not normal, and two, that they didn't run all the appropriate tests. So let's get into the correct testing. One of the tests that doctors are going to run is the thyroid stimulating hormone test, or the TSH test. That's how we abbreviate it. And this test can be very, very helpful if you've had hypothyroidism for a very, very long time, because it'll be advanced, so it'll be elevated. So that number, the TSH number, will be high if you have an underactive thyroid. But unfortunately, when scientists first determined the normal range of the TSH, they had a lot of people in that pool of blood, of normal blood, that had thyroid disease. So the reference range was very lax.
That is fascinating how that came to pass, as we had sick people become the norm.
Sick people became the norm, so they were saying if you have a TSH of up to 10, you're normal.
You feel terrible.
You feel terrible. So when my TSH was at a 4.5, I was a sloth. I was losing my hair. I was forgetting things. I was taking way too many naps throughout the day. And, you know, I just wasn't myself. So a woman in her 20s, 30s, 40s should have a TSH somewhere right around 1. So if you've had your thyroid tested, make sure that you request a copy of your lab results, and you always look at your own labs. So this is just one of the many tests. The other tests that I recommend are thyroid antibody tests. So we talked about how most cases of thyroid issues, whether it's hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, are going to be autoimmune in nature. So depending on which scientists you follow, depending on which statistics you look at, it's going to be anywhere from 90% to 99% that are due to autoimmunity. And one of the things that happens in autoimmune disease is basically our immune system begins to recognize the thyroid gland as a foreign invader and launches an attack against the thyroid gland. And so you can actually measure this happening in the blood by looking at antibodies to the thyroid. So I recommend doing 2 types of antibodies for Hashimoto's, thyroid peroxidase antibodies and thyroglobulin antibodies. And if you guys are taking notes at home, it's TG and TPO antibodies. Now, these can be elevated for about a decade before you see a change in TSH. And if you have these antibodies elevated, you're in a perfect position to help prevent the progression of the condition and prevent having the need for thyroid medications.
It's excellent, excellent information. So the recap is your TSH should be at 1.0, and you should always make sure you're checking your thyroid antibodies, both types.
Absolutely.
What about T3?
T3 is another excellent test to do. I recommend doing the free levels of T3 and free levels of T4. These are basically the active hormones that interact with thyroid cells in the body. So this is something, in some cases, some people may have something known as central hypothyroidism, when there's a communication breakdown between the pituitary and the thyroid, or the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the thyroid gland. And this whole command center is broken, and for some reason your TSH may be normal, but you may actually have abnormal levels of thyroid hormone. And it's usually the TSH is something that is responding to low levels of thyroid hormone in the body, but that communication doesn't always happen. So these are also important tests to ask for as well.
Okay. Anything else on the testing? Because I really know that a lot of people want to hear about medications.
Every now and then I recommend doing, if everything else is normal, doing a test for reverse T3, and this is a type of thyroid hormone that basically blocks thyroid receptors. And in some cases, doing a thyroid ultrasound when thyroid antibodies are negative may be another way to uncover Hashimoto's, because while majority of people with Hashimoto's have the thyroid antibodies, some of them don't. So about 10% of people won't have the antibodies in the blood.
10% won't have antibodies.
But they'll still have changes consistent with Hashimoto's on their thyroid gland that you can view on an ultrasound.
Okay, and now with reverse T3, that's one that a lot of traditional MDs don't run. And in my practice, I would always run reverse T3 because I wanted to see the interaction between the adrenals and the thyroid and which came first and what started what. So how often would you suggest someone get their reverse T3 hormone checked?
It really depends on what you're working on. So sometimes I'll recommend, if you're doing lifestyle interventions and if you're trying to change things, testing that about once a month to once every 3 months. If you're feeling great and if you're stable, then you can test that maybe once a year.
Once a year, okay.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about medications for a second. You say that Synthroid is the #1 prescribed drug, and it doesn't work for everyone. And a lot of people watching are on Synthroid, I'm sure of it.
Absolutely. So this was the #1 prescribed medication in 2013 and 2014 in all of the United States. This medication is a synthetic version of one of the thyroid hormones. So we talked about measuring T4 and T3. So Synthroid is actually T4, and this is the less active version. And it needs to be converted to T3 in the body to do its job fully. I like to think of T3 as kind of like the beautiful hair hormone, the energy hormone. It really helps to rev up fat loss. It helps to rev up hair growth and energy. And so in some cases, when people take the Synthroid, the T4 medication, they do just fine with it because their body knows how to convert it properly and everything works like a charm. But in a certain amount of population, studies will say 10%, but me being biased, I've never had I've had a lot of people come to the pharmacy or to my website or to my practice where they'll say, I'm just not doing very well on this medication. So these are all the people I see, and I don't necessarily believe that it's just 10% of people. It seems like to me that it's more closer to maybe 50 to 60% of people who just don't do well on this T4 medication only, and likely because they're not converting it to the more active thyroid hormone.
Gotcha. And then Armour, a lot of people say, well, Armour is a little more natural. Is that what I should do? Or they are taking Armour.
Armour can be a very, very helpful medications, and there are a lot of miracle stories of women who've been on Synthroid for a really, really long time, and they continue to struggle with their weight. They're losing hair, and then they're really tired. And then within a few months of getting on Armour, you can see a transformation. You see a transformation in their facial features, you see that they're losing weight without changing anything else, and you see that their hair begins to grow. I, of course, recommend that everybody work with their physician to find the optimal medication for them, because we're all going to be a little bit different and not everybody's going to be responding the same to these medications. But Armour, Naturthroid, and WP Thyroid are very, very similar in nature to one another. They both contain T4 and T3, the more active thyroid hormone in them. And some people just report that they feel tremendously better on these types of medications.
Okay. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And the other part of your book is lifestyle interventions. So we understand the problem, but what do we do to fix it? What is in your book? And I want to talk, I know you have a new program coming out. I really want to talk about what are the action steps to take you from Hashimoto's to remission.
So there's a lot of different things going on in Hashimoto's, and people need to understand that Hashimoto's is more than just a thyroid condition. So it's a whole body condition. So there's a lot of different systems that are broken that we need to fix. I would say that most people with Hashimoto's are going to have nutrient depletions, food sensitivities, impaired stress response. They're going to have some inability to get rid of toxins. Gut issues are very, very common, and then in many cases we also see chronic infections. So a lot of times it's a combination of these things. In some cases we have miracle stories where we just address one little thing and everything turns around. So it's really working with the person to try to figure out what their individual root cause or root causes are.
Okay, so let's dive into all of those. What are the most common nutrient deficiencies that you see with Hashimoto's?
Vitamin D is a biggie, and vitamin D is an immune system modulator. So every case of autoimmune disease has been connected to low vitamin D levels. Hashimoto's is no different. So Hashimoto's cases are going to be more aggressive whenever there's a vitamin D depletion. And most of my clients that get into remission, I see them with vitamin D levels between 60 and 80. So vitamin D, you can get that tested with your doctor, and you can take an over-the-counter vitamin D supplement. That's one big thing that I recommend. Another common nutrient depletion.
In what percentage of IUs would you suggest?
What dosage of IUs?
Dosage.
So, work with your doctor, but generally I would recommend anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 IUs per day. And this is one of those vitamins that you want to make sure that you're testing. So if you're supplementing, test it again within 3 to 6 months, because too much of this can be a bad thing.
Yeah, you can get, too much of anything can be a bad thing.
Especially vitamin D, which is a fat-soluble vitamin, so it's stored in our body. Other vitamins, some of the B vitamins, for example, if we take too many of them, the body just clears them out. Speaking of B vitamins, B12 is another very common nutrient depletion in Hashimoto's. This can be implicated in fatigue, in memory loss, trouble word finding, and this is something that you can get tested along with your doctor. Thiamine is another common nutrient depletion that not many people are aware of. It's not something you can generally test for, but I generally recommend doing a dosage of 600 milligrams per day of B1 thiamine. Take it over the course of 3 to 5 days, and you're going to be able to see a difference in fatigue right away.
And you wrote a blog about thiamine, and really, I remember reading it's an exceptional blog. Just what one little nutrient deficiency filled in can be a game changer, where you have energy and you can get through the day and life looks different. So we can never underestimate the power of deficiencies.
It's amazing, because people who had blood sugar issues, they were able to stabilize their blood sugar once they got on thiamine. I've had, random people come up to me at conferences and just run up to me and give me hugs. They're like, thank you so much for your thiamine post. Yeah, and it's just a simple nutrient that you can do, and it can take you from fatigue to fantastic within 3 days.
And you don't know what you don't know, which is why we're here to bring light to this.
Absolutely.
You also touched on something that I've been eating, sleeping, and breathing for the last couple of years, which is gut health and gut infections, and how they can be a root cause of Hashimoto's, any type of thyroid disorder. Really, they can be a root cause of. So talk a little bit about that and Give me an example of someone where you identified a gut infection, you healed it, and their thyroid was able to be reversed. Their thyroid disease was able to be reversed.
So I came across the gut and thyroid connection looking over Dr. Alessio Fasano's work, and he talked about how there are 3 different things that need to be present in every autoimmune condition. And they are the genetic predisposition, a trigger, and then intestinal permeability or a leaky gut. And to me, this made a lot of sense because I had irritable bowel syndrome and I had acid reflux. And then a few years later, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto. So I was like, okay, this is kind of a missing piece. What can we do about it? And so with my own self, I identified a few different gut infections and got rid of them. And just what I've been working on with my clients over the last few years is trying to figure out what gut infections they have. One of the really common ones that I see is H. pylori. And what we've seen is whenever we treat the H. pylori infection,
Which is a bacterial infection.
it's a bacterial infection in the stomach that's associated usually with ulcers, is we'll see a huge reduction in thyroid antibodies. People will start digesting their foods correctly. A lot of stomach symptoms will go away. And in some cases, people have been able to reduce their dosage of thyroid medications and even get off of thyroid medications.
And prevent future stomach cancer.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This is so powerful, what this work can do.
Absolutely. And another type of infection that I often see as well is blastocystis hominis.
Yes, it's a nasty protozoa.
It's a nasty, nasty bug, and it's one of those things that modern scientists and clinicians will say is commensal. So that means it's not causing any harm, it's supposed to be there, so on and so forth. But that's not really the case because it's been shown to cause intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And I've found that in a lot of my clients. What I found is that every time we find this bug and we treat it, we see a big reduction in thyroid antibodies. I've had one person who got rid of thyroid nodules after treating this pathogen along with some of the other recommendations. And then we'll see people who are maybe able to get off of thyroid medications or prevent the need for thyroid medications. I was really excited. There was a study published from Bosnia just in 2015, recognizing the connection between Hashimoto's and blasto. And I was like, yes, I've been doing this for a few years now, and it's nice to finally see it in the literature.
Well, you know, so many of our gut thrivers have Hashimoto's and blasto, and I don't really believe in that whole idea of commensal because it's prime real estate in there, and if you are a bug and you're taking up space, you're either doing good or you're doing harm, and we can replace that commensal with symbiotic, and so...
Good bugs are much better than bad bugs.
Absolutely. Okay, so then what about the diet? What is the perfect thyroid healing diet, in your opinion? What foods do we avoid? What foods do we add in?
So I did a survey of 2,232 of my readers, and it's very much the responses have mirrored what I've been seeing in my clients. Gluten-free diet is a must. So close to 90% of people with Hashimoto's, even if they don't have celiac disease, are going to do so much better on a gluten-free diet. For some people, it's a complete remission of Hashimoto's within 3 months.
I feel like we need to really point that out if you guys heard that. And I have had so many experiences in my clinical practice when you get someone off gluten, that may be all you need to do for 3 months to dramatically slash or reverse your antibodies. It's super powerful.
Absolutely. And some people are able to reduce their thyroid medications. About 20% went from subclinical hypothyroidism to normal thyroid function in one study.
Excellent.
And it's not just people with celiac disease. Only about 1 to 15% of people with Hashimoto's will have celiac disease. And in my survey, 3.5% of them reported that they had celiac disease, yet 90% of them had improvement whether or not they had celiac disease.
Right. So it's just a good recommendation for everyone with a thyroid issue across the board.
Everybody.
Okay, what else are we getting rid of? Maybe soy?
Soy is another biggie. Soy, you know, with gluten, you oftentimes are going to see reactions in your body once you get off of it and you try to reintroduce it. You might have joint pains, you might have stomach upset. Soy is a little bit trickier because you're not necessarily going to feel it in your body right away when you get off of it. But what you will find is when you get back on soy, you're going to become anxious about 2 to 3 days after that. And that's what most of my clients have noticed. And so soy is one of those things that can really interfere with thyroid function, and it's usually genetically modified, it's found in processed foods. It has been marketed as a health food when it truly is not. So one of those things that you just need to get rid of right away is soy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say corn as well? I mean, definitely for the genetically modified factor, but how else does corn interact with Hashimoto's?
So going into the other foods, so about 80% of people feel better on a grain-free diet and on a dairy-free diet. So getting off of corn and getting off of dairy can be a very big game changer for people with Hashimoto's.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to be able to talk a little bit about your program. So just now tell me the three, if you had to choose just 3 foods to add in, which 3 of those foods would you add in?
Broccoli, it's actually a myth that you shouldn't eat it with thyroid disease, so it can be very, very helpful. It helps to detoxify the liver. Avocados, they're a source of great fats, and organic meats.
I love it. Okay, so now how are we going to implement this? You have a new program coming up where you teach people how to hack their own Hashimoto's, which I love. And so tell me a little bit about this program and how you're going to help people do it on their own.
So the Hacking Hashimoto's program basically guides them through the process of how I would work with a person if they were to come and consult with me. It takes them through figuring out what testing they need to do, what kind of lifestyle changes they need to make, so which supplements to take. We give people a lot of different assessments so they could assess themselves to see what they may be missing.
Which is crucial to assess along the way if you want to be successful in an online forum, I've found.
Absolutely, because your Hashimoto's is going to be a little bit different than somebody else's Hashimoto, so you want this to be tailored to you. So that's why I'm big on the assessment component of it. We look at nutrient depletion, so which ones may you have? We look at a few different diets and how to figure out which diet is going to be the optimal diet for you. So we give people templates, we give them meal plans, recipes, the whole 9 yards for some of the most helpful diets, as well as how to modify them to your own body.
I'm a big fan of your program. I've peeked in there a lot, and I like you address environmental factors and toxicity. You're really working with the liver and things like heavy metals. So we support infections.
We support liver. We look at all the different elements and all the different triggers. So we're going to be looking at the liver, how to support it, how to look at toxins, how to look at toxins in your body as well as in your home. We're going to be looking at potential infections. We're going to be looking at dental triggers. So anything that you can think of that would be contributing to an immune system imbalance, we're going to be covering that in that course.
It's going to be an excellent course, and I know you cover all of your bases to truly heal from the root cause, and I'm so happy you were able to join us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now, if you guys want to heal your thyroid, you want to dive deeper into this right now, you have to get your phone or your computer, go on Amazon, and get Hashimoto's The Root Cause. If you want to find out more about Isabella or how to work with her or about her program, you can get to her through our website, thewholejourney.com/thyroid. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.